and warped by the rain, driven by the snow. I'm drunk and dirty, don't you know? And I'm still willing. And I was out on the road late at night. I seen my pretty Alice in every headlight. Alice, Dallas, Alice. And I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari.
Welcome. This is Michael Volkov, and this is episode 230 of Corruption, Crime, and Compliance. And our episode today is a review of the U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division's enforcement activities. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today on Corruption, Crime, and Compliance. Sorry, we've been off for a couple of weeks. Things have been absolutely bonkers with the Ukraine war, the invasion, and the implications in sanctions, reputational issues, ethical issues, has just been overwhelming for the whole sort of business community. And obviously carries great risks. Our heart goes out, of course, to the suffering and terrible tragedies in Ukraine. It's really heartbreaking to watch, and our hearts go out to them in every way possible. Anyway, today, turning to the Antitrust Division. And the reason I scheduled this was really because the Antitrust Division was taken over by a new Assistant Attorney General, Jonathan Kanter, who's quite an interesting character in terms of ramping up antitrust enforcement. And this is perhaps one of the few areas, I think, at the Justice Department where promises were made and promises have been delivered, in the sense of promises were made about robust antitrust enforcement. Now, in fairness, he had a lot of bipartisan support from both Republicans and Democrats. It was sort of a meeting of the minds in terms of the need to ramp up antitrust enforcement. Not to say that the targets of the inquiry were the same, but there's definitely a bipartisan support for a more robust investigation and enforcement activities against big business, particularly in the digital area, as well as in merger enforcement, and we're going to talk to that. But AAG, and I'll use that as Assistant Attorney General, shorthand, Kanter promised this new era in antitrust enforcement. He won, like I said, bipartisan support, got through the confirmation process, and he promised aggressive merger enforcement, new civil enforcement initiatives, particularly in the digital markets, Facebook, Google, other digital markets, and constraint of market power in numerous industries, as well as an increase in criminal enforcement. Frankly, he promised a total new approach to antitrust. He has outlined his philosophy, and to be quite candid, he's delivering. He's delivering on what he promised, and it really has made for an interesting time in the antitrust bar and in the antitrust enforcement area. Recently was the annual antitrust spring meeting in Washington, D.C., which is an important and fascinating event at which sort of policymakers, enforcers, and the bar get together. And he delivered at that meeting another important speech, and I think my summary today is going to go over sort of two speeches and what he talked about. This was the second speech that he delivered of importance, and I'm going to talk about the other one, talking about digital markets. And he outlined early trends which sort of demonstrated his commitment to what he promised to do when he came to the position. So, for example, with regard to merger enforcement, he alerted everyone early in his tenure that he planned to reject remedial settlements to merger cases and instead would seek, go, no-go, basically abandonment of illegal mergers. According to Kanter, the remedial settlements did not effectively work in practice. He cited the fact that research demonstrated that these settlements, which usually were divestitures or even behavioral type constraints in terms of court orders against behavioral actions in the marketplace, tended not to protect or even advance competition. So based upon that, and the fact that remedial settlements did not effectively work in practice, he has basically applied an approach which is basically that if we're going to challenge a merger, we're going to go all the way and seek to get the parties to abandon it. Now, as an example of these so-called flimsy settlements, he cited comments from a recent food and agricultural listening session conducted with the FTC, which centered on the impact of a 2017 dairy merger that failed to preserve or even advance competition. And based upon sort of these flimsy settlements, he said he's basically not going to employ that tool anymore. That's a big change. I mean, frankly, I worked in the antitrust division in the 80s, and, if you blocked a merger, most times there was a settlement that was reached, a negotiated settlement of some sort. So since his taking over the division, they've sued to block 4 mergers in the last 4 months. In fact, he cited that they rejected a proposed settlement from Cargotect and Concron, which resulted in the parties abandoning a proposed $5 billion transaction. In addition to the merger enforcement, Kanter observed that the division currently has 6 active civil cases, including the monopolization case against Google, and merger challenges against American Airlines, Penguin Random House, United Health Group, U.S. Sugar, and Verzatec. And with respect to criminal enforcement against illegal cartels, Kanter cited its record of 21 indicted cases against 42 individuals, including 9 CEOs and corporate presidents. And as of the end of fiscal year 2021, which is in October, the Antitrust Division has 146 pending criminal grand jury investigations. Much of the Antitrust Division's criminal enforcement, if you read and follow the blog and the podcast, focus has been on labor markets and illegal no-poaching agreements and wage-fixing collusion. In anticipation of this growing litigation workload, Kanter has turned to reorganization and expansion of resources and staff. He's appointed 2 supervisory deputy assistant attorney generals to oversee the rapidly expanding litigation workload. And to address litigation resource needs, the Antitrust Division is actively hiring additional trial attorneys. In another interesting announcement, though, he also noted that the department intends to increase enforcement of Section 8 of the Clayton Act, which prevents interlocking directorates. And Section 8 enforcement has historically been restricted to merger enforcement investigations, but now he's saying he's ordered prosecutors to take a look at Section 8 enforcement outside of potential mergers. Finally, he talked a little bit in this speech about the criminal leniency program, the changes that were made recently to ensure that companies seeking the benefit of it promptly report criminal activity after it's discovered. And in an important aspect to this, that companies remediate any potential violations prior to receipt of a leniency letter. Thus, companies will be required to enhance and remediate their antitrust corporate compliance programs to meet DOJ's expectations and requirements. All interesting things, but clearly AAG Kanter means what he says, and he's executing on a plan that he has made very clear to everybody and outlined to political people on the Hill and within the antitrust in the United States Department of Justice, and also within the Antitrust Division. So this is going to be an interesting time, and there's more to come. Now, in specific focus are digital markets and digital market companies. And aggressive antitrust enforcement against the digital markets is clearly a bipartisan issue right now. And Kanter has really focused on the rise of monopoly power over digital markets, and he analogized the state of digital markets in a speech, which is really interesting, that he gave in Brussels at an international antitrust meeting. And he analogized the state of digital markets to the historical concerns underlying the antitrust laws, which was monopoly power over a market, which was inconsistent with our form of government. Market-based economies, he says, give citizens choice and opportunity as part of our fundamental freedoms. So citizens, and so now we're not just focused on consumer welfare. He is articulating a broader and more historically consistent approach prior to the 1980s of what the antitrust laws were intended to address. In his view, citizens have too little choice where they get their information from, and who takes or controls their personal data. Consumers cannot choose which algorithm controls what news is promoted and how to interact with their social network online. These limitations, he thinks, stifle open markets and competition. The root cause of this restriction is what economists call network effects, which enable digital companies the ability to engage in what he has clearly thought about and really wants to push, the idea of engaging in moat building, moat like a castle, a moat around a castle, which in effect protect existing monopolies from competition. And the speech is really fascinating because Kanter outlines sort of anti-competitive moat building activities that keep competitors from, or would-be competitors from, challenging a monopolist's product or services. Another way to describe this terminology, in my mind, is the famous barriers to entry, which is well known and well regarded. But this moat building idea talks about it's sort of a broader concept. Think about a moat surrounding all the aspects and operations of a castle. And moat building incorporates the concept of a knowing construction of a moat, that is, the knowing and intentional creation of barriers to entry. And this terminology may become the new, yardstick when it comes to digital markets, given the unique market factors associated with digital monopolists. And Kanter's point is underscored by his description of how moats defend the core platform monopoly from entry and disruption. In the digital economy, potential competition could come from platform participants, potential entrants, and disruptive technologies. But at its core, monopolists in digital markets rely, in my view, on exclusionary conduct. And he cited two significant factors in the digital market that perpetuate this problem. First, the network effect that is so powerful, and feedback effects across entire connected ecosystems, like Facebook, for example, that it creates enormous monopoly power and later anti-competitive incentives. And given the breadth and instantaneous effects on the internet, a monopolist does not face large physical network demands. In other words, they don't have to build a new factory to enter the market or time to create a network akin to the historical natural monopoly, let's say, of telephones, electricity services. Actually, it's a quick and rapid feedback mechanism on the internet, and where network effects can just rapidly occur. I mean, we may call it going viral. In that sense, it's a much more rapid impact in a marketplace. Second, a novel feature that he cited of digital markets is the wide range of business relationships and market dynamics associated with this scope. A dominant platform can be a critical trading partner to thousands or hundreds of thousands of smaller businesses. So given these market realities and the broad cut of, let's say, digital markets these days, and the increasing prevalence of moat building by dominant market participants, Kanter advocated three active and deliberate strategies to advance competition. One, and I think this is probably the most likely to occur, is aggressive merger enforcement in core digital markets to prevent monopolists from preventing entry into their core markets. 2, assessment of moat-building strategies when considering unilateral conduct, in other words, monopolization cases, like Google's case. And 3, review of actual or threatened discrimination by dominant companies and the impact that such actions have on other businesses. And there, this just rings a bell with me, and I don't mean to say rings a bell, but if you go back to, the arguments in breaking up the AT&T phone company, one was that the natural monopoly of local phone service allowed them to discriminate against competitors, to which, there were at that point in time, like MCI and other long-distance carriers. And we're seeing sort of an analogy to that same type of situation here in terms of looking at discrimination by dominant companies in terms of access or the ability to get onto the platform and gain the benefits of the platform and information needs from the platform. A really interesting discussion by Jonathan Kanter, and I think we're going to see a lot of enforcement in this area with regard to digital markets. Obviously, we also are seeing legislation that's gaining steam in terms of targeting some of the major players and their activities in the digital marketplace. All in all, an interesting time. Stay on top of the Antitrust Division. They're pretty busy. There are a lot of cases coming out, and we'll stay in touch with you with regard to any new developments in this area. Anyways, all the best to everybody. Stay healthy. Stay in touch. Again, our hearts go out to the Ukrainian people, and we hope that things can turn for the better over the coming weeks. Thanks again, everybody, and talk to you soon.
Thanks again for listening to Corruption, Crime, and Compliance. Please subscribe to the podcast series. The Volkov Law Group believes that every company should have a robust ethics and compliance program. Experience and research show that ethical companies are better performers in the global marketplace. You can learn more about the legal and compliance services we offer at our website, www.volkovlaw.com. You can also follow our award-winning blog, Corruption, Crime, and Compliance, and our podcast series. You can contact Michael Volkov at his email address, mvolkov@volkovlaw.com.
White sand wine, and you show me a sign, I'll be willing to be moving. I've been kicked by the wind, robbed by the sleet, had my head stoved in, but I'm still on my feet, and I'm still really smuggles and smokes and folks from Mexico, baked by the sun every time I go to Mexico, and I'm still, and I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, Tehachapi to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven the back road so I wouldn't get weighed, and if you give me weed, white sand,